you. Thanks, Talu. It's so great to be here.
Thank you so much. All right, let's get to it. We're here to learn from you because you have experience in public speaking and you're teaching classes in it. The first question is, how did you get into using humor in public speaking? When did you discover that you have that gift to be able to do that?
Yeah, thanks for asking the question. So how did I first start using humor in speaking? Well, I mean, my first kind of intro into speaking or being in front of people and speaking was actually improv comedy. This would have been quite some time ago. I went through kind of an unpleasant divorce many years ago, and I was pretty bummed out, and I was writing for a television show at the time, so and I just didn't have a lot going on, and so I was trying to find, okay, what can I do that is just for me, just for fun, for like no possible financial benefit. And so I took an improv class, and it was one of those things where in the first class, I kind of was like, where has this been all my life? This is amazingly fun. And I really enjoyed speaking and working with partners on stage in front of an audience. And it was pretty transformational. And from there, I learned I was quite good at it. Then I started doing Toastmasters, also enjoyed that. And I think I just found that I really enjoyed making folks laugh in my talks. And it just kind of went from there.
Wow, exciting. Now that you mentioned that in your book, The Wink, you mentioned the story with your friend Bill, how you went to your first comedy night and how everything went. Can you give us a short story
Oh my
about
gosh. Yes. Well, stand-up comedy, I think, is the pinnacle. It's the most difficult challenge, I think, because in improv, you're kind of making it up. And so if it doesn't work, you're like, well, we'll just make up the next thing. But in stand-up comedy, essentially, I've sat at my desk at home and written out sentences and thought the audience is going to love this. And then if they don't, there's no out. That you thought it was going to be funny and it was not. And so I remember I took a class in Los Angeles quite some time ago, a stand-up comedy class. And so we worked for 6 weeks, like carefully checking each pause, every piece of punctuation, trying to figure out how to science that laugh out of that audience, And the culmination of the class was I went to an open mic night. That's where amateur comics, they go to a coffee shop or a bar or something, and they get 3 or 5 minutes to get behind the mic and try out their material. And I remember it was a spring night in Los Angeles on Melrose Avenue. I went to this coffee shop and I was sitting out in the audience waiting for my name to get called to try out my jokes. I was so nervous, I had a nervous feeling in the pit of my stomach. Oh man, I hope they laugh. And I got up there and I started talking and everything kind of slowed down like a car accident. And I don't really remember much, but I do remember the sound because it's silence. No laughs. Just, they call it, I bombed. That's what they call it. And I was devastated. I came back to my chair and sat down and somehow made it through the rest of the evening. And then after, though, I went out and my friend Bill was there. He's a really experienced comic. And I said, Bill, how did I do? And he goes, well, you got up there. But he said, focus on connecting. You'll find your audience. You are enough. And then he also said, you should try some jokes too. But I think the takeaway was, for me, carefully writing out a perfect speech or a perfect joke is less important than finding a real-time connection with an audience in the moment. I've had much better luck with connecting and getting mutual laughter when I just rely on being connected to the audience rather than putting forethought into jokes. That's what's worked best for me.
Wow. I mean, at the beginning, I could imagine that you struggle with how this works, comedy and things like that. One of the things that I've observed in the environment is it's okay to try to come up as somebody who wants to make somebody laugh. But I've also observed that it's very easy for people to feel that you're trying to insult them when you try to make them laugh. And my question is, what is your own experience with that at the beginning? Do you always just come across as somebody who intentionally want to make somebody laugh, or have you experienced situation whereby you genuinely want to make somebody laugh, but sometimes they just feel offended as a result of that?
Well, first of all, I think laughter and comedy is completely culturally dependent. And so you always have to ask 3 questions before building or starting on any presentation. And the first question is, who is the audience? What is their culture? What do they find funny? What are their needs? What are their current problems? Know as much of that as you can. Because, for example, when I teach, I lead a lot of team trainings for public speaking for large tech companies here in the Bay Area. And often around the holidays, I will be hired to lead virtual team building exercises, like hour-long little exercises for teams, technical teams. And these teams are around the world. We're talking about Middle East, Far East, like all different places. And I very quickly had to really figure out what laughter, what's going to work. Because, for example, Will Ferrell, he's like a comedy actor here in the United States. People don't know him. They aren't that familiar with him in other countries. So making references to that is not that helpful. What I've found is 2 things. First, making fun of yourself, always safe. Always safe to do that. Never make fun of your audience and never make fun of what your audience loves. And sometimes you may not know what they love, so best just to stick to making fun of yourself. That's where clown comes in. Clown, the art form of clown is very much about being vulnerable and allowing the audience to laugh at me as kind of the joke. But it's critical to, as I talked about in my Toastmasters speech, you need to start with feeling that you are enough before you start making fun of yourself, because it can quickly, if you don't have that self-confidence, it can quickly change into needing validation from an audience. Like, oh, my PowerPoint's broken. Is that okay? And then that's just yucky. Nobody wants to make you feel better as a presenter. But if you know that you're enough, if you're doing it intentionally, then it gives the audience permission to laugh. They are not worried about you. So we can all have fun together. So in terms of your original question about insulting an audience with humor, I think if you stick to making fun of yourself and using strategic vulnerability, you'll be pretty safe from that.
Yes. Thank you so much. Wow. This is really very helpful for people who are thinking about doing this and also using humor during presentation. One of the things that I also wonder that is connected to this is it's good that you, after some time, have this mindset or position of mind to make sure to keep the humor to oneself versus trying to pick another person. But over the years that you've been doing this, is there any specific feedback or specific lesson that you've learned from connecting with audience? Because the whole point is you're trying to connect with the audience, but then I'm trying to know if there's any particular lesson that you've learned over the years about connecting with audience.
Sure. Well, to connect with an audience, that I like to give 4 tips. First, I mean, it's easy to practice and rehearse in front of your mirror and everything, but once you're in the room, once you're in the auditorium or your Toastmasters club or whatever, you need to incorporate the audience. You need to have them be part of your presentation. So here are 4 tips. First, make it in the present. By that, I mean have activities, simple activities, even simply anybody get stuck in that traffic today, hand raise engagement. That's an easy way to add engagement where you don't necessarily open it up to a Q&A where someone can take control of your presentation and perhaps steer it in a way you didn't want to. Simply asking people to raise their hand or even nods. Like, does anybody know what I'm talking about? Excuse me, like, and nodding your head. People will nod back to you. That's called prompting gestures. That's an easy way to incorporate your audience. Secondly, make it about them. As much as possible, trying to incorporate your audience in their observations. Use those prompting gestures. If you're talking about some kind of a problem and then providing a solution, maybe it's a problem that technical teams have in communicating changes in code or something like that. Simply asking the audience, does anyone have experience with this problem? And do a hand raise and see who has it. And maybe even ask somebody, why don't you describe what you're dealing with? So, because you want to get your audience on board with your problem, all nodding. Yes, I have that problem too. So the first tip, make it in the present. Second tip, make it about them. Third tip, make it personal. If you want to engage your audience and bring them along with you on your journey, it helps if you tell a personal story. Stories, I mean, I'm sure, Tolu, you've heard innumerable tips on storytelling. Storytelling is the big sexy thing right now, and for good reason, because if I'm telling a story, it opens a loop. And what I mean by that is, if I start a story and you, Tolu, relate to me as the protagonist, you're going to suddenly want to know what happens. If I said, boy, I woke up this morning and, man, I was really nervous about something, everybody in the audience is going to be like, okay, I open the loop. What is he nervous about? They want to know. This is called situational interest. This is interest that wasn't there before, but simply by opening this loop with a personal story, I've created interest. So make it personal. Those are our 3 so far. Make it in the present, make it about them, make it personal. And the last one of how to engage your audience is make it real. And by make it real, I mean, if imperfections happen in your presentation, acknowledge them. Acknowledge them to your audience. Oh, my PowerPoint went down. Let me fix it. Things happen. Let's move on. Simply showing that you're human, showing that you're a real, authentic human being up there, your audience will start rooting for you. Again, like I said before, you don't want to require validation. Oh, my PowerPoint went down. Is that okay? Because then you're kind of putting a responsibility on your audience. You don't want to do that. Simply acknowledging it and then being in control. I've got it. Let's move on. That's a great way to get the audience on your side. So those are my 4 tips. Make it in the present, make it about them, make it personal, make it real.
Good. Excellent. I hope our audience is listening to that so that they can make use of that when they want to give a presentation. It's been good so far. You mentioned something that seems very interesting to me, that when you're giving a presentation, you want to carry the audience along and you want to give them the opportunity to participate, but then you don't want to ask the audience to talk, because you might have 1 or 2 audience that cannot probably stop talking for whatever reason. And I really want to ask a question about that. So once in a while, I've seen people who just like talking, and I've seen this type of individuals, they don't really care whether you listen to what they're saying. It feels like they just want to talk and they want to get something off their chest. And the problem is, for people who do that, they tend to take that kind of attitude into public speaking. And how do you help such a person to understand that it's not about what they have to say alone? Because in your book, you also mentioned the fact that content is very important. You have to prepare, you have to do this. But then you said in your book, Wink, that connecting with audience is as important as the content. But then how do you convince such individuals that really want to get something off their chest, that it's not really about what they're trying to say, it's also about how the audience is reacting to what they're saying and how they're also reacting to what the audience is saying?
So to clarify your question, are you talking about a presenter who has that challenge, or how to deal with a person who's asking a question in the middle of your presentation?
A presenter.
A presenter. Well, I would steer someone who tends to just start getting things off their chest in a presentation to those three questions. Who's in the audience? And you should ask these before you begin writing any presentation. Who's in the audience? What do I want them to do at the end of this presentation as a result of my presentation? And put that in one small sentence. Use that sentence as a yardstick or meter stick, wherever your listeners may be listening to, and put that, what I want them to do as a result of my speech, and check it against every part of your presentation. And if it does not directly lead to that call to action, get it out of your presentation. And the third and final question is, what's in it for them? Let's face it, your audience, all they care about is, how is this helping me? How is this solving my problem? And if me just talking about all my problems or something does not help solve a problem in my audience's mind, that is a waste of time. That's therapy. That's not a presentation. A public speaking presentation should be focused on the audience and solving the audience's specific problem, period. When it's more about me and just talking about my life, that's something different. That's not what I'm talking about. So that's what I would suggest for someone who tends to ramble about themselves in a presentation.
Yeah. And because you mentioned the apparent first situation, which is a random audience that could probably just have something to say about what you're saying, either they're being disruptive or because they just get overexcited and they have to say something. In the past, how have you dealt with such particular audience? Once in a while, you have somebody in the audience who just have to say something or try to take over your presentation. How do you deal with that?
Well, first of all, this is Rigby. He's my cat.
Hi.
And he also wants to be a part of this.
Yes.
Well, I'm glad you asked that question, because I speak for tech companies at technical trade shows quite often. I work at a lot of cybersecurity trade shows, and in these, I will be in the expo hall. I'll be in a booth with about a 20-person theater, and I'll deliver these presentations all day long to just attendees of the conference. And inevitably, in each conference, I will have exactly what you're talking about. Someone will enter, they want to ask questions, they want to show either that they're very smart or that they have a bone to pick with the company, and they just want to talk about their problem. And I've come to realize that this is a huge opportunity for me as a presenter. Oddly, to get the rest of the audience on my side. Because if you've ever been in an audience listening to a presenter and you notice another person in the audience is being difficult with questions or interrupting, you are irritated with this person too. It's not just the presenter. But it's a huge opportunity, because a presenter that becomes flustered, all of a sudden I lose respect for the presenter. A presenter who just lets them ramble, I get irritated with the presenter. But a presenter who elegantly shuts them down or simply placates them until the end of the presentation, my respect for that presenter has just shot into the stratosphere. It is a huge opportunity to really show your professionalism as a presenter. So the tactics I use are a couple. First, if it's possible to have some kind of physical, either whiteboard that you can write on, or even in a virtual meeting, a shared document that you can share in the meeting, simply say, I hear your issue. We don't have time to deal with it right now. I'm writing it down and we will deal with it offline. And then show the person that you're writing their problem down. Because we've all been in meetings where, Tolu, we're going to take care of that offline. The speaker just says that, and then no one ever talks about it again. It's just gone. And the person asking the question knows that's going to happen too. But if you write it down, it actually feels like to the questioner that their question was honored, and they probably will sit down and be cool about it. Secondly, simply steering interrupting, paraphrasing, and then rephrasing. A lot of times, if someone's asking a question, so what you're asking is, if you'll allow me to interrupt, and then simply paraphrasing what they're saying, a lot of times will also make them feel heard. Oh, yes, that's what I'm saying. Or they'll start to clarify. And then when they start to clarify, you can say, all right, we're going to deal with that offline. We need to move on. Or you can mention the time limit of the presentation. And regardless, by dealing with this opportunity elegantly, your audience will be so much more on your side. It's a huge opportunity.
Wow. Excellent. All right, if you're just joining, we're talking about engaging humor, connecting with the audience using the various skills that my highly skilled guest, Don Colliver, is providing today. If you have any question, please put it in the chat. If you want to say something, please go ahead and say it. This has been an exciting time, and it's more fun to go. Basically, we said so far that connecting with audience is very important, and we're using humor to connect with the audience. And in what are the ways you've used to add humor to your presentation, and what works best for you as a person so far?
Sure, that's a great question. But actually, I'm curious about you, Tolu.
Yes.
Where are you from? How does humor work in your culture? I'm really curious about that.
All right. So I'm originally from Nigeria. How does humor work? For me, what I've used as a Toastmaster is to use cultural differences. When I first joined Toastmasters, when I gave presentation, I think the best presentation that's actually on YouTube anyways, that people love the most, that most people feel disposed towards humor that I've given, is based on cultural differences. The fact that people know that the way people live in Nigeria is different from the way people live in America, and me coming across and say, oh, this is what I've experienced in Nigeria. This is what is going on in America, and try to compare those things. Something like Coming to America by Eddie Murphy, right? In fact, the title of the presentation was actually Coming to America. It's actually on YouTube. You might want to check it out.
I'll check it out.
Yeah, so for me, and to further answer your question, it's just thinking about my experiences, comparing it to the experiences here, and just telling a story. And I saw that that's what you did during the Toastmasters International. That's what I have to talk to this guy, because I immediately saw something special during the presentation. Did I answer your question?
Yeah. I think that's so cool. And I love that you called your speech Coming to America. I'm definitely going to check that out. But it goes to show that cultural differences are so critical for humor. And also, I want to say that vulnerability is different, carries a different cultural meaning dependent upon where you're coming from. And some cultures, it is very, very uncomfortable to deal with vulnerability. And coming from different lifestyles, it's different to show up in a vulnerable place. And that's fine. That's fine. I'm just kind of speaking from my own experience here in the States. But I think talking about differences in a humble way is also always a fantastic way of using humor and connecting. But to answer your previous question, even beyond talking about differences, the easiest way I've found to get laughs or just to add levity or humor or fun to a presentation is simply to acknowledge things we all have in common. That's kind of how Jerry Seinfeld, the famous stand-up comic, he would just talk about everyday things that we all kind of relate to. Just off the top of my head, I'm remembering a joke of him walking around in the supermarket and he saw mesquite barbecue sauce, mesquite barbecue. And he's like, where does that come from? Mosquitoes? That's so dumb. That's like the dumbest joke. But you're kind of like, well, you're not wrong. Where does mesquite? What is mesquite? Like, it's simply acknowledging things that we all have in common. That's like anybody gets stuck in the traffic out there. Did anybody else have trouble finding parking before the Toastmasters meeting tonight? Simply talking about things we all have in common is a great way to connect. And it's easy. It's super easy. It shows that, hey, I'm not better than you. You're not better than me. We're all kind of the same. We're all dealing with the same stuff. This is called affiliative humor. And there was a study actually done that found that affiliative humor versus more aggressive kinds of humor or making fun of an out-group, affiliative humor or finding fun in things we all share was positively correlated with connection. So if you want to connect with your audience, simply have fun with things we all share, and that'll be a great way to start to connect with them.
Wow. It's funny the way you set me up for failure. You made me say the wrong thing, then you said opposite of what I said.
No, but I'm just saying your presentation was brilliant, but I think for me, it's walking a tightrope. Like, yeah. I wouldn't want to go to Japan, for example, and then build a speech on how I'm different. My lifestyle is different than lifestyle in Japan. I may inadvertently step in some kind of cultural trouble and then have to apologize after. That's just me. You're clearly braver than I am.
No, that's not true. Yeah, I totally agree with you. Finding a common ground and connecting with people. And that's one of the books that I've read that changed my life. It's by my mentor, John Maxwell. Everyone communicates, but very few people connect. And one of the major insights in that book is to find a common ground, which is just what you said. So I understand it clearly. I understand that it's
What's
very
the name
important.
of the book? That sounds like
Everyone communicates, but very few people connect.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it's a very nice book by John C. Maxwell. Right. Now, now that we're still talking about humor, we know it's very important. And I'm going to tell you what I've observed. I watch comedians and see how they do their thing. I know people do one-liner. There are people that took their time to tell a story. And for Toastmasters, because we are both Toastmasters, that's one of the things we have in common. Now, you see, I'm learning. I'm trying to find a common ground.
Exactly. We could talk about counters. We can talk about general evaluators. We have all this stuff we can have fun with.
Good. So as a Toastmaster, it's very important to tell a story. And what's your advice in telling a story in such a way that it can be funny? What's the length of the story? What would you advise to do to make sure a short story can be funny?
Interesting. Boy, no one's ever asked me that question. Making a story funny. Well, I will say this. I talk about storytelling to a lot of my corporate teams, sometimes marketing teams, sometimes technical teams. And if you're building a story for a presentation, I think it's first important to understand What is the reason you're telling it? How is it moving your audience towards your call to action? And being very clear on that before you start writing your story. That way you can make sure every detail in the story is pointing you towards that goal. Otherwise, there's no reason to have it and have that detail in the story. Now, shorter is always better, I think, especially for comedy. And as you get into the story, and this is particularly important for more business type storytelling, you need to let your audience know why you're telling the story. I want to tell you a story about a customer who dealt with your exact same problem. So be very clear as to why you're telling the story. And once you get into it, there are 3 things I like to use to make sure I launch my stories most effectively. It's called, it's a framework. I call it SPD, setting, problem, decision. So first, you want to establish the setting. And by setting, I mean environment and emotion, 2 E's, environment and emotion. So you'll talk about, it was fall. Like when I was talking about the stand-up comedy open mic that I bombed at, I talked about it was spring in Los Angeles. It was Melrose Avenue. I also talked about my emotion. I was so nervous. I had a feeling in the pit of my stomach. So that kind of brings the audience in. I once heard that the goal for us, if you're going to be storytelling, even in a corporate sense, you want to move from the feeling of speaking in a boardroom to the feeling of speaking around a campfire. It's a different tone when you're like, when you kind of lean in, you're like, okay, everybody, I want to tell a story. It changes the dynamic. It makes everyone lean in a little bit. So setting first. Second, problem. Your audience or your protagonist, you, needs to be dealing with a high stakes problem. And you need to reiterate that very clearly to your audience. They had a big problem. I had a big problem. I'm not sure. I'm trying to think of what my problem was. I guess my problem was in the stand-up comedy example was I really wanted to do a great job at this open mic. I was so nervous. It was high stakes for me. I worked so hard. And then lastly, decision, SPD. D is decision. Your protagonist needs to make a conscious decision to do something to resolve that problem. The final part of that open mic night was I decided after I bombed to work really hard on figuring out how to make audiences laugh. That was the decision, because that shows to your audience that we have agency. I can be faced with a problem. I can make a decision. I can take action and do something about it. I think by just telling a problem and not giving a decision, you're just talking about trauma. You're not talking about a story. A story resolves by having a decision. So those are kind of my tips. In terms of making it funny, I think the more you can laugh at yourself, that's always the best way to do it. Be able to laugh at yourself.
Wow. Interesting. I mean, so you said laugh at yourself, and one of the concepts you stated clearly in your book, The Wink, is the fact
Look at that. I love how you keep holding it up. Thank you, Tolu. Look at that. Yeah. Boom.
Yeah. One of the things you said in your book is the fact that before anyone tries to give a presentation, the person should try to know themselves. And you said in your book that you give an advice of how it's good to think about 20 activities that someone did when they were younger and try to see if they can do those activities again and things like that. I mean, I just want to hear some stories from that. Did you do that yourself? Did you hear a story from somebody doing that? And how did you come about that?
Oh, absolutely. Thanks for asking. Man, no one's asked me that. Well, I did have you heard of the book The Artist Way by Julia Cameron? It's kind of this, I think it's a 12-week, maybe an 8-week or 9-week writing exercise. And each week you have different things that you write about or do. And it's kind of made to connect with your original passions, to try and figure out, okay, what do I really love to do? Because it's so funny when I'll be coaching someone or working with a class, a public speaking class, and I'm like, all right, you did a great job. That was a great speech. You should do something nice for yourself. What are you going to do? A lot of people are bewildered. Like, I don't know. I'll ask my wife, or I don't, what do I like to do? I don't know, like watch TV. And it's so interesting. People, and me included, I had a mentor at one time who was like, Don, you should take care of yourself this weekend. What are you going to do? And I was at a loss. All I know how to do is like push. What's the next professional book I need to read? What's the next speech I need to write? But actually doing something non-productive that I like to do was so foreign to me. But a kind of a hack to get me to remember what I like to do was I went back, okay, what did I like to do when I was a kid? Can I write 10 things I like to do? Ride a bike, go swimming in a lake, climb a tree, like goofy things, draw for no reason, just goofy stuff like that. And then I would set a timer and do that thing. And I found that there is something about having non-productive activity that allows my subconscious to start organizing all of these things I've been working on. So when I return to it consciously, all of a sudden, a lot of things will line up that I was struggling with before. It's really incredible how simply going on a walk, going on a hike will suddenly reorganize. I mean, this happened with my convention speech in the international convention. I knew I needed to add another story between somewhere, and I needed to add a story about my Spiegel World Tour, where I was the host clown of this North American Cirque du Soleil style show. And I was walking, and as I was walking and not thinking about it, it was like, talk about the banana spit juggling, put it between the two halves of the presentation. It just popped in, and it would not have happened if I was sitting at my desk, like grinding it out. I had to put stuff down and do something pleasurable. So that's how finding those things I used to love to do has really, really helped me progress faster.
Wow. Excellent. This is really good.
Tell me what you like to do, Tolu, when you were a kid. What kinds of stuff did you like to do?
Growing up was not that exciting for me because I grew up in Nigeria. I didn't grow up in America.
Yeah, well, what did you do? What did you do for fun?
What did I do for fun? I go out with my friends and we play video games, play soccer a little bit, do ice and water. I don't know whether you know what that is, whereby people run about, you run and you touch somebody, they're going to be frozen for some time.
Yeah.
And until somebody comes and touch them and they lose their state of froze for some time.
Ice.
The ice state for some time. Then it keeps going like that. It's just running around and touching one another and things like that. That's one of the things.
Cool.
So soccer, playing around, video games. I played some video games, had a video game until my mom had to just take the video game away because we were playing it too much.
Same here. I was a total nerd on my computer games when I was a kid. Absolutely. So did you grow up in a city or more country? Like, what was the environment like?
Yeah, funny enough, I didn't even know that people differentiate that until I came to America. All right. So, I mean, we usually city and village. I think that's more of the word that we use. And I didn't grow up in a village. Village means a rural setting whereby people don't care to wear clothes sometimes. So I didn't grow up in that environment. I didn't grow up in that part of Africa people show on the media. So I don't
Sure.
I don't know how to relate with it. So I didn't grow up in that setting. Of course, I would describe it as a city whereby you just have regular normal people. You go to school, you come back from school, you do the basic things and prepare for school the following day. That kind of a thing.
Very cool. That's awesome.
Good. Did that answer your question very well?
Yeah, I could listen to how you grew up all day. I'm totally serious. Like,
Oh, wow.
were you on, was it soccer team at school or you just play in the neighborhood?
Yeah, just in the neighborhood. I was not that good in soccer, really. I just for fun.
That sounds like you had a lot of like friends around. Like where I grew up, there weren't that many kids my age, so it was like not so fun. Like, but that sounds like a blast, like having a lot of kids my age around.
Yeah, yeah. It was in an estate setting whereby you have multiple houses and you have a lot of kids around. Yeah, it
Oh,
was
that's
fun.
awesome.
It was
Very
fun.
cool.
I'm grateful for that. You mentioned something. I like the way you start me and ask me a question. No one has ever done that to me before. By the way, it's like that's fun. Thank you. I enjoy it. One of the
It's a
things,
conversation, right? Yeah,
yeah, it's a
absolutely.
conversation. I didn't know I was getting myself into trouble when I told you it was a conversation. I didn't know I was getting, but that's fine. So when you were talking about your speech and how you had to prepare, you had to make sure that you got everything right, and also in your book, you mentioned the fact that preparation is very important. Although you want to be there trying to say something funny, but then you also want to make sure that you do your best. And you stated in your book, The Wink, that when you don't prepare, you're actually disrespecting your audience, which is very clear. And you one of the advice you gave in your book, Wink again, is the fact that you want people to practice. And one of the ways they can practice is to go to a public place. They can put headphone and start
Hmm.
presenting publicly. So, headphone is important to probably for people to not think that they're losing their mind, but then you really have to start presenting like you're on the stage. So, have you done that? Do you know anybody that did that? How has that helped you as a person?
I do that all the time. I probably did that 15 times before my convention speech. I would walk around my neighborhood with my AirPods in, giving my whole speech as I was walking. Um, and folks in my public speaking classes, I suggest that, and then they do it. Then they come back and report, hey, that was really, really helpful. Um, but actually, the most helpful thing that I found for that keynote that I delivered at the Toastmasters International Convention was I reached out to my district, my Toastmasters district here in San Francisco, and I said, hey, I would love to deliver this to local clubs as rehearsal. It's 45 minutes long, just so you know, which is going to disrupt, a Toastmasters meeting. But if anybody would like to see a free version of this, which they would have to pay for before the international convention, let's do it. And I probably delivered it 7 times to live Toastmasters clubs. And that was so critically helpful because, first of all, Toastmasters is built for positive and constructive feedback. We already have a rubric on how to provide feedback, but especially with jokes and with comedy, that is so important to get feedback because at first, for example, like spoiler alert, in my presentation, as you know, my pants fall down. They fall down twice currently. In the past, I had them fall down 3 times and I got feedback. Hey, you know what? Twice was funny, 3 was really annoying. So I learned, oh, I have to cut that third pants fall down out. And there was another thing. I also have sound effects that the audio person, like silly sound effects, they're cueing. I delivered this presentation virtually a couple times to virtual clubs. That comedy, same with the pants down, it did not work in the virtual setting. People at the end were just like, it's annoying, it's creepy. It's creepy when your pants fall down on camera in a video. It just looks weird. And I was like, you know what? I get it. That's kind of obnoxious and weird. So I have to cut it for virtual stuff. But I never would have learned that if I didn't practice it in front of a group. It was so critically helpful.
Wow, wow, excellent. So you just took away my questions. I prepared those questions for you already, but you answered the question. So I'm just gonna, I'll let it go. So
Yeah, it
what?
was so amazingly helpful for sure.
Good, good, good. One of the things that I can tie to that is you said that it's very important to be able to play with the audience when you're giving a presentation. And I've never seen it that way before. I've given a presentation and give humorous speeches, but the idea of having a content and taking breaks from that and being able to have an engagement with the audience, being in the moment, commenting on something that someone is doing right away in that moment, is something that takes a skill. How have you been able to do it, pushing your content aside and just say, okay, I'm gonna, without losing track? Because for me, the problem is that I might lose track of my presentation if I just that's like, oh, commenting on somebody, so that person did something positively, and if I keep doing that, I might lose track of my presentation. Do you
Yeah.
have experience with that, or how do you prevent losing track of your presentation?
Well, two things. So the question, as I understand it, is how do I have interaction, positive interaction back and forth with an audience and not completely lose track or blow my time of my presentation because I kind of forgot where I am? So two things. First of all, rehearsal. Really, really being confident in understanding. I don't mean memorizing verbatim every word of your presentation, but knowing the outline. There should be 3 to 5 main points at the most of a speech. And knowing those 3 to 5 main points will always help you kind of pull back into the freeway. I like to see it if you're on an interstate or a road. You take an off ramp to do this dialogue back and forth. You get back on the on ramp and you're back on your freeway. If you don't know the order of that outline, you can go off that off ramp and then all of a sudden you're miles away and you don't even know where you are. So understanding your outline, and if your presentation is consecutive, like it's a 4-step process to build this aircraft, and that's what your presentation is, it's pretty easy to get back into the track because it's consecutive. But if your points are not consecutive, I want to talk to you about 4 things that are great about trees, and they don't have anything to do with each other. It can be really challenging to find your way back because you may forget where you were. In those cases, I suggest to my students to memorize transitional statements. The sentence that connects point A to point B with some kind of logic, and actually verbatim memorizing those, because that will kind of put in your brain how your presentation fits together. That way, if you do go off and you're answering a question or having some fun with an audience member, you'll remember, okay, I was talking about trees, green and roots. The green of I don't know, and somehow you know what the logic is to bring you back in. So that's my first tip, is rehearsal and memorizing those transitions. My second tip is take an improv class, a simple improv comedy 101. You do not have to be funny at all. In fact, it helps if you're not. The funny people, the people who think they're hilarious who take improv 101 are really, really irritating usually. So honestly, especially if you think you're not funny, because the great thing about improv is you don't have to be. All you have to do is listen and respond. What I learned from that is taking improv classes, that many, many times, more than half the time, my impulsive response is better and smarter and funnier than whatever I could have written the night before. So I started to learn to trust my impulses in the moment, trust them. And I think that's a big thing that people struggle with when they're dealing with questions or dealing with audience interaction. Like, oh, I don't know if my impulse is right. And they'll think about it, and that the word will go through a bunch of filters before it comes out of their mouth. With improv, you learn to trust that it's going to be okay. What my impulse is going to be fine. It's going to work out great. I have the mic. I'm in control. I know what's next in the presentation. It will be okay. The audience wants me to win. The audience wants me to keep going. So improv really helps me have the confidence to go off the freeway and talk to folks and then come back.
Oh, wow. Excellent. Excellent. This is really good. We're still talking about Wink. This is the book we're talking about with my guest, Don Colliver. One of the things you also mentioned in the book is the first 30 seconds. The first 30 seconds of a speech is very important. And for you, what works for you? What do you do to make sure that this audience trusts you to be able to engage you for some time? Because it feels like you really have to quickly make a promise to the audience in the first 30 seconds. How do you, what worked for you? What would you recommend?
It's a great question. Nobody's ever asked that for me before. Well, it's interesting. I've watched a lot of keynote speeches, and I've realized that most of the time, keynote speeches start with a story, a personal story that's vulnerable, that shows that, hey, I'm a speaker, but I'm fallible. I'm not perfect. I'm just like you. I've failed in the past. And that way it changes the dynamic, because maybe when you're up on the stage, everybody's like, oh, who does this guy think he is? He thinks he's awesome. By telling that vulnerable story, boom, you bring us at the same level. That for me, and that's why I included that open mic story at the beginning of my Toastmasters presentation. I wanted to immediately say, hey, yeah, because the person who, it's also important to realize what the context is of your presentation. Say in a Toastmasters meeting, that Toastmaster, their intro for you can cover a lot of ground that you don't have to deal with. They can talk about the subject of your speech. They can talk about any background that you need to convey. And those first words out of your mouth can be very, very specific as to what you want to do. That's why when I see people speak in the first 15, 20 seconds, they're just like, thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Bill, for introducing me. It's great to be here. What a great day. It's a waste of words. Like, those words are so useful at that moment to really create the dynamic you want between you and your audience.
Yeah, they start talking about what they ate in the morning, what they ate yesterday night, and you're wondering how is this relevant to whatever you have to say.
Exactly.
All right.
But Tolu, other thing, when you see a polished speaker and they step up there and they are just silent for a moment, connecting with the audience, and those first 4, 3, 4, 5 words are so carefully chosen, you're just like, oh, wow, this person has created a moment. We are seeing an experience right now. I think that's really special.
Wow, good. If you're just joining, we're talking about Wink with my guest, Don Colliver. This is the book we're talking about. One of the things that you said and you discussed very well, or the technique that you used in your book, is using analogies to convey message. For example, you said that when you're giving a speech, you're talking to the audience. It feels like you are on the other side of the table. Your audience is on the other side, and you're trying to bring them to your side so you can look at the problem together. That's very clear. I like that a lot. Then also, I liked when you were comparing, you were talking about experience and confidence. You compare it to the relationship between chicken and egg. Which comes first? Like, do you have confidence first before you have the experience, or you have to have experience before you have confidence? So that's very clear. I love the way you do that. So what would be your advice on using analogies like that in presentation? Does it always work for you, or do you just try it this time? What would be your advice for that?
Frank, I'm glad you asked that question. Analogies, I think, are the pinnacle of creating kind of a symbolic model for your audience. And it's hard. It's heavy brain thinking. It takes a lot of thought. to create or to come up with or write a really functional analogy, because you have to think of, okay, what if I'm talking about this solution to a technical problem, what is this relationship like in another environment, in another situation that's familiar to everybody in the audience, that I can connect to an existing paradigm in their brain. Like, remember when the internet started, someone termed it, I don't remember who, the information superhighway. Like, and now we just all call it that. But if you think about it, highway, lots of cars coming in and out, can take a lot of volume of traffic. It goes all around the world. It's a brilliant analogy, but it took some thought. There's a lot of analogies that didn't work to come up with that. So I am still, frankly, figuring out kind of a symbolic model or analogies for what I speak about, this strategic vulnerability. If you look at Simon Sinek has graphic analogies using Venn diagrams. It's how simple can you make your concept, and can you create a graphic that kind of illustrates it so it's very easily ingestible to your audience. One thing, I just read a keynote speech book, and he talked about, he said, good speakers teach us what to do. Great speakers teach us how to think. And if you start thinking in analogies, you are thinking about how to think, how to conceptualize something. And that's really, I'm not there yet. I'm working on it. That, I feel, is the pinnacle of presentations.
Wow, wow. This is really helpful. This is really helpful. We're talking about Wink, transforming public speaking with Don Colliver. We're gradually coming to the end of our presentation. It's very important to connect with the audience, and you talked about being vulnerable. And that's a big word, really, because it's very difficult to meet somebody and try to let them know things about you that you don't feel comfortable even about yourself. But you're saying, oh, this is something that about me I don't like. Can you just know some of it? It takes a lot of practice to be able to do that. So my question, two questions. What's your advice on that? And how do you know when and the extent of being vulnerable?
Right. Great question. Great question. Brene Brown, this is her bread and butter. She talks about vulnerability in all of her books and her TED Talks. She wrote a book called Dare to Lead, which is a lot about vulnerability in a professional setting, which is tricky. It's very tricky. That's why I use the term strategic vulnerability. And I'm only speaking for me personally, before I can share something vulnerable, I need to do personal work. I need to have emotional intelligence about myself, where I'm not looking for validation from someone through sharing my vulnerable self. I have to be good. I have to know, like I talked about in my speech, I have to know that I'm enough before I do that. And then I can strategically be vulnerable just as a way to connect. But if I'm being vulnerable in the hopes that I'm going to manipulate someone to tell me I'm okay, that means I need to do more personal work before I start playing with vulnerability as a way to connect. Brene Brown calls it what did she call it? A shadow intention, I believe. Sometimes we may not even know that we're doing it, that I'm being vulnerable in order that you tell me I'm okay. So it really takes some self-observation to be ready to do that. And I think I touch on this in the book. It sounds woo-woo, but I really think a meditation practice is extremely helpful in terms of self-awareness, because for me in meditation, I start to teach myself to observe myself dispassionately. I may be stressed out or sad or angry. With meditation, I'm able to observe that feeling and not be wrapped up in it, just observe it. And that way I can start to use vulnerability in a more strategic way too.
Yeah, so I think I have, well, coming to an end, I just have two more questions before we go. The first question has to do with the fact that during your presentation at the convention, you engage in some activities. How much of those activities were intentional? How much just came off the line? And what would be your recommendation in trying to figure out, okay, what can I engage the audience in? What can I make them do? What can I make them move and going and slapping high five and all those things that you did? How much of all those things were planned, and how can you become really proactive in coming with such activity at the tip of the time like that?
Yeah, that was all pre-planned, all completely pre-planned and practiced a lot. A couple tips for that. First of all, understand this is a thing where I actually recommend you memorize it. Memorize the instructions. Your instructions to the audience must be absolutely clear, because if there's any unclarity, they're going to lose respect for you as the speaker, and you may lose control of the room. So it's important to be very clear as to, for example, at one point in the presentation, I said, we're going to take 30 seconds. I want you to turn to the person near you that you know the least. I want you to find one thing you have in common that has nothing to do with the fact that you're at a Toastmasters convention. When you find this, I want you to raise your hand up and keep it there. Then I said, go. The audience got loud, figuring. I saw hands go up. Then I said, okay, that's good. Thank you. Keep those hands up. What's going to happen next is I'm going to call on some people with their hands up. You're going to tell me what you had in common. I'm going to reiterate it over the microphone. Anyone who has that also in common, I want you to yell out, hey. Very clear instructions. And what I realized was every single time I practiced this in a club, people would say something silly. I didn't have to do anything silly. There was always something silly. And it was just because people have weird stuff in common. Even if no one had that in common, people would laugh at that because they'd be like, oh, you're the only person that has that. Laugh, laugh, laugh. It was very, and there's a thing we call when I was doing clown performance, we would call it bulletproof. That bit, that part, there was really no way it could fail. I had an out for anything that could possibly happen. I knew what to do and how to relate it back to my content. So that's only through thinking and practice. I started to realize, well, this could happen. If this happens, I do this. It's kind of like a decision tree. So I guess to answer your question, if you're going to use audience interaction like that, think it through from beginning to end, and also think through every possible iteration that your audience could do. What if no one responds at all? How do I handle that? Can I wrap it back into my presentation somehow? And the perfect place to practice this is Toastmasters. Like, who cares? It's a 5 to 7 minute speech. There's like 10 people in the room. Why not practice it? Who cares? Practice, learn what works, learn what doesn't.
Yes. I mean, Toastmasters give me the confidence to be able to do this. Anyways, if not for Toastmasters, I wouldn't be doing this. So we should just say that. We're still talking about my guest book, Wink, Transformating Public Speaking. I'm with Don Colliver. One of the things that you said clearly in your book was check-ins, and I saw you do that. I've seen people do that. In which case, you're giving a presentation. And you're not just asking the audience to do something. You're actually, are you guys okay? Are you doing this? Do you understand what I'm saying? And you also give an analogy in the book whereby when you're taking the improv class, you have your teacher sat in the audience and you have to make contact and you guys have to check how everything is going. So my question is, what kind of words can you use to check in with your audience? And what worked for you in the past, such that you're not just wanting them to react, but you're asking them, do you understand what I'm saying? Are you guys feeling okay? Kind of how have you been able to do that, and what's your recommendation?
Great question. And I use this all the time in my public speaking classes because there's lecture that happens. And one thing I've found, and I'm finding this more and more in public speaking books, is trying to get away from the words, do you understand? because there's an inherent there's like a status imbalance in that question of like, I'm smart. Do you understand what I'm talking about, dumb people? And you don't want to imply that. I like to more, if I'm trying to get the audience or a small class involved, I'll more ask an open-ended question. Does anyone have experience with this particular thing I'm talking about? How did you solve this problem? I want to hear from you. Like, we're on the same level. You might have some great insight that the rest of the audience needs to hear, that I need to hear too. So I like to open it up like that. In terms of simply doing check-ins, yeah, I like to keep it more. Does anyone have experience with this problem or this solution and want to share how it went for you, rather than, do you understand what I'm talking about? Sometimes I'll say, am I making sense? I'm not sure I'm making sense. Does that make sense? I'll make sure that I'm not implying that there's like a status difference of knowledge.
Okay, that's really exciting. My last question: is there somebody that were in your shoes long time ago? They discovered they are gifted, they're writing jokes. What should they do to get out there and start doing the great things that you're doing? What's your advice for them?
Well, I guess if they're good at jokes, which I am not, I'm a terrible joke teller, start going to open mics and join the community. Like, writing that book would not have happened if I did not find a support group, an accountability group. I'm not talking about paying someone. I'm simply talking about finding peers that are doing the same thing that I'm doing and want to non-competitively all continue forward together and share best practices. Wow. That has been the game changer for me in whatever I've tried to do in my life. There's a big business in coaching of like, hey, I'll take $5,000 from you and help you become a speaker, help you write a book. That works for some people, doesn't work for me. I'm more all about find yourself a peer group, like a mastermind, some people call it. Encourage each other. Be careful with constructive feedback. Really focus on encouragement and positive feedback. That's really what I need. If I want constructive feedback, I'll ask for it. But sometimes all I need is like, hey, good job. You did that. Great work. That'll help power me forward to do more, and I'll start just finding my way. So that would be my advice.
Wow. What is before, if any of our guests miss anything we've discussed today, I think the central portion of our book, The Wing, is the fact that you are enough. I think you kept saying that in your book and also during your presentation. You're already enough to do the things that you're talented and gifted to do. If it's comedy, it's giving presentation, you just need to get out there and do it. That's clear. But then what would be your last piece of advice for our guests today?
Boy, last piece of advice. Well, the whole thing about you are enough, I really struggled on how to phrase that, how to add it in the book. Because at the end of the day, just like what you're talking about, trying these things, going to an open mic night, trying a 5 to 7 minute speech, adding an engagement to a Toastmasters presentation, it's very scary. It's scary. And if I hook my well-being to the outcome of that individual speech or that individual open mic, I'm done for, because fact is, I'm probably not going to be great the first couple times. But if I realize, hey, no matter what happens, I'm still good. In fact, I'm better from taking a risk. I'm even better. I'm enough. If I keep that little piece of granite in there always, it allows me to take much bigger risks, because that's the only way to grow. So that would be my takeaway for your audience. You are enough. Give it a shot.
Wow. Excellent. I'm looking at it from humility comes from before promotion, right? You're still small. That's why you're saying you're not funny, but you just give a speech that is funny. So now, what does it mean by it's not funny? Okay. Thank you so much for being here. This is our book that we're sharing today, and we talked about today from my guest, Don Colliver, Wink. I recommend this book. Very good for public speaking. If you can get it, please get it. And if there's any question, you can always post the question. Is there any way our guests can reach you?
Absolutely. Two ways. First of all, I talk about an exercise that folks can use called the hand raise engagement exercise to practice this engagement with audiences. Anybody can grab that. It's on a PDF. It's at doncolliver.com/engage. That's doncolliver.com/engage. I'll send you the PDF. Also, I'm happy to connect with everybody on LinkedIn. Just reach out to me. So thanks so much, Tolu.
Good, good. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you for this opportunity, Don Colliver. I really hope our guests get the best from this. I know it's going to be another opportunity to talk to you again. It's a privilege to have this chat with you. I'm really grateful. Thank you so much.
Privilege for me as well. Thanks so much, Tolu.
Thank you. Yeah. Bye, our guest.